Assalamu alaikum. That is, may God's peace be upon you. Welcome back to the power of educating our own. I am your co-host, Marsha Nivens Muhammad, and I'm here with
Quran Shakir.
And Patricia Salahuddin. Welcome, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
welcome. Alaikum assalam. It's always good to be back and have another opportunity to talk about another interesting thing, right? And to share resources with the community. The Power of Educating Our Own is a podcast hosted by the Clara Mohammed Schools Network. We are a network of approximately 20 schools. I feel like very soon I'm going to have to change that number because we have so many people talking about wanting to open schools. And so that's an exciting thing. But currently we have approximately 20, and those schools are full time, weekend, which we coin strong in schools, and virtual schools. And those schools are across the country and in Bermuda. So if there are schools other places, please let us know. We are so excited to connect with as many schools as possible because we really do want to work with you all to strengthen our institutions and do some collective work, right? We want to make sure that we're all growing together, right? We don't want to be uneven and, all this kind of thing. We want to be able to grow together. So I'm just throwing that out there, right? If you have a school, let us know. For those of you who are watching us, let us know where you're watching from in the comment section. Just put a little shout out in there, and we'll share it on the screen. But tonight we're gonna jump right into our conversation. Our guest we have some people giving salams already. I saw Khadija Hassan. That is the sister of Imam Bilal Hassan. Haven't seen her in a while, so salams to you too, sis. And we, as others are joining, just drop it in the chat, and she shares that she's from NYC. Welcome, Khadija, and like I said, others joining. But tonight we are going to have a conversation about our Islamic history, right? Like we're in African American History Month. Some people may say Black History Month, right? And so this month of history, right, cannot happen without also talking about the contributions of Muslims during this month, particularly the African American Muslim and the contributions to American society. So, our guest for this evening is Brother Amir Mohammed. He is the founder. If I'm wrong, he's going to correct me, but I believe he's the founder of America's Islamic Heritage Museum out of Washington, D.C. And we're not even going to, belabor the point. We're going to bring him right on stage so that we can start this wonderful conversation with him. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Salam rahmatullah barakatuh, my sisters. Only thing I would correct is that I'm a co-founder. My
Okay.
wife behind all great men is a great woman. So my wife has been the inspiration and the guide that helped motivate me to achieve this goal. I want to
Wonderful.
thank your sisters and your audience to that came on. I would just like to share with you our rich history. I just came back from New York, sharing the history of Muslims in America through African American History Month in two large high schools. And if you can see my exhibit, my presentation, the history of Muslims in America, we will begin. The uniqueness of the history of Muslims in America comes in like 4 to 5 different ways. Muslims first came here as explorers from West Africa, as well as those that came with Columbus. Muslims also came here fleeing as early settlers from the Spanish Inquisition and from some of the Barbary Coast Wars. Then you had the wave of Muslims that came from the African diaspora, the slave trade from the mid 1700s to the early 1800s. Then you had the wave of Muslims that came from pre-World War One to pre-World War II. But we'll begin with some of the legends, some of the early American Muslim stories that exist throughout the United States. There's quite a few books. There's one book called Africa and the Discovery of America by Leo Reiner. This is a 3-volume set that he goes into the Africans came from West Africa, how they was in Haiti, how they used gold. It is one of the primary sources that talks about the Africans in early America. Now the book is They Came Before Columbus by Ivan Van Sertima, as well as Ivan Van Sertima, African Early Presence in America, along with a few other books by Voyage of the New World. Columbus last was last, and in these books they point out different records that was founded. Where that, if we look early on, I know when I went to school, we was taught that they thought the world was flat from 1492 or up to 1492. And they tell us that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. But one of the biggest things that happened in 1492 was the fall of Granada, the last of the Islamic empires up in Spain. And that is where they found the maps, how the Muslims used to travel around the world. So if we go look at any places where the Spaniards early ruled and controlled in the Caribbean and the Americas, they was the areas where they took from Muslims. There's a report that Mansa Musa's brother Abu Bakr traveled over here in 1412, and there's different reports of their travels. This here is a map of Mali, which consists of Guinea, Senegal, Ghana, a lot of the nation states that we know today. Mali was a great empire of gold, of wealth, empire. They had knowledge centers around that were very educational centers. Gaul, Timbuktu, Guinea, and other places all throughout Africa. It had a very long and rich history. This here is a map of the waterway current, how the Africans traveled to South America, as well as the Caribbeans and parts of South Carolina and the Georgia area before the Americans came. Even then, before Columbus came, there was a report of a Chinese admiral arriving here in 1421. This is a DVD that tells his story and their journey coming over here. When Christopher Columbus hired 2 Muslim children of Muslim family to bring them over here as captains of a couple of the ships. And when he arrived in Haiti, they was told that there was Africans that they traded with. They used some of the West African words for gold. And some of the gold and the minerals was this exactly as 18 parts gold and six parts silver, with 8 parts copper. It's the same mix that the Africans used in West Africa in many parts. So what we have is, when after the Spanish Inquisition came, the Portuguese started coming down, and they were the first Europeans to start to enslave us in the 1400s, early 1400s. Then when you had many Spaniards or Muslims and Jews that fled the Spanish Inquisition, and some of them arrived here into the Americas. And when you'll see a little intersection amongst them in South Carolina and other parts throughout the early United States. Here, this is a fort in Puerto Rico. It's called the Fort of the Moors. It's facing the ocean. There's a wall that's facing the ocean that has this Arabic script written on it. And then in Old San Juan, downtown, there's this store, this restaurant that has this Arabic script written on it. It still exists there today. There was a Muslim named Estebanico who came here with the Spaniards in 1527. He's credited with discovering Arizona and New Mexico. And many African-American books, especially by J. Rogers, they call him Little Stephen or Negro Stephen. But he's known as Estebanico, credited with discovering Arizona and New Mexico. Another legend story is Nasruddin. He was a Muslim and fell in love with a Mohegan chief daughter, and somehow he got killed. But this is some of the legends that we find all throughout in the United States. Another story is that there's a European brother named Anthony Van Jameson. He was a European pirate and got captured, and then he converted to Islam, and they named this town in Morocco called Sal or Sali, Morocco, what still exists today. One of his sons moved over here. His son's name was Anthony Van Jameson Van Sali. Some of his descendants are Anthony Bogard, Jackie Onassis, and these two women down here are Muslim sisters today. That is the seventh and eighth generation of them. Some of his, he's credited with being the first European to own property in Brooklyn, New York. You could go to Brooklyn, New York's library, and they tell you some of his. He owned the Quran, his writings, and the different land that he owned, and the farms that he owned in Brooklyn, New York area. Another legend is how California got its name. There's reports that California got its name from Queen Latifah. She was the African queen. Was a ruler of the West Coast, Bayard area of California. And there were many African women that were with her and supported her. And these are some of the reports how California got its name from Queen Latifah. Another report is Matthew de Sousa. He's known as having African and Moorish and Portuguese descent. He came here as an indentured servant. He got his freedom after a few years. This is a plaque honoring him in what they call St. County in Maryland. There's other reports. There's a 1963 report of the first known black man that came here. His name was Anthony, and they call him the Black Moor. There's reports of the 1760 Virginia General Assembly article that if you were Moor and a Turk, and I will show about it a little later, other Muslims around that were scattered throughout. There's a group of them in Delaware, Maryland, and they still live there today, or Delaware, outside of Dover, Delaware. And they married amongst the Natchez Indians. We went to a powwow of theirs maybe a couple of years ago, and some of these Moors still live today. They lived all throughout. You got them in Westcott. You got them in Hartford, North Carolina. There's reports of them in Nebraska. There's reports of them in South Carolina. There's reports of them in West Virginia. In West Virginia, it was called the Guineas of West Virginia. Another code word that they use, what they call the Moorish. And another group of people that arrived here, and they were known as the Melungeons. Melungeons live in the Appalachian Mountains of Tennessee and Kentucky today. They say that Elvis Presley mother was a Melungeon. They say that Abraham Lincoln mother was a Melungeons. These Melungeons still exist today, and many of them have that mulatto skin. They'll mix light black and white as a mixture in their skin. And these are some of the photos of it. Now, these paintings on the left in this panel says Melungeons. There's a museum in Natchez, Mississippi that has 6 paintings. At the time, I didn't understand when I was taking the photograph of them, so I didn't take them all. But in these paintings, it's called the Moriscos, and the process of how they made us lighter is what the concept of these photos. They showed the different shades and grades of how they got us become lighter. Now, what we see with the Spanish, through the Spanish Inquisition and the Moors being over here, after we lost Spain, the Spaniards took over a lot of the parts that the Muslims had ruled in Caribbean and South America. And so there's stories, many of the stories are lost because of that, because once the Spanish took over from the Moors, the Dutch took over from the Spaniards. So each people started rewriting history and destroying the prior people who was conquered history. This here is a map of West Africa. A lot of times we was taught that West Africans had no culture, no history, we was not civilized. And then they also try to say that if we could read and write, there was some Arab blood traced in there. But this is deep West Africa. Matter of fact, the first Muslim community was established in Africa during Prophet Muhammad time, so Islam, in Ethiopia. But this is West Africa. And many times our West African centric brothers want to connect us to East Africa versus connecting us to West Africa, where we was captured from and came from. So these are some of your nation states that existed. Great Fula, then you got Futu Jalo, you got the development of Timbuktu, Bambara, and you see the others, Ashanti, Bongo. These are many places where the Muslims was captured from. And you see here the Goree Island. Then you come down further, you see Elmina. Reasons. Now, this is in the 1800s. This is towards the end of the Atlantic slave trade legally. But you see the developments in the different tribes where they brought us in at and the growth. Now you got the British at Freeport and their Goree Islands. These are the different islands where they brought us out of. Then this here is a brother in the 9th century, Al Jazeera. There's reports that he wrote over 200 books in his lifetime. One of the most popular books that he's known for is a book about animals. But he also wrote a book called Fakir al-Sudan al-Bani, which is between black and white. And he describes some of the characteristics of the black people, and he called them Zanjin at the time. He said these people have a natural talent for dancing to the rhythm of the tambourine. We still had that rhythm, from James Brown to Michael Jackson to the influence of people of the color today. We dominate the culture all throughout the people of color. There's no better singers anywhere in the world. No people more polished and eloquent, and no people less given to insulting language. You know how we've been insulted, and across the board. No other nation can suppress them in bodily strength and physical toughness. One of them will lift huge blocks and carry heavy loads that will be beyond the strength of most Bedouins or members of other races. They are courageous, energetic, ingenious, which are the virtues of nobility, and also good tempered, and with little prosperity to evil. They are always cheerful, smiling, and devoid of malice, which is a sign of noble character. So our ability to forgive and be compassionate and not to go to war for the injustice that was done to us, that is part of our character of nobility. That is part of that Sharif within us as a people. Now here is a map of the growth on the right with the green is the growth of al-Islam in Africa, from in North Africa, the 7th century, the 8th century. You got the 9th, the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th century, the development of Islam, all parts of West Africa, Central Africa. Christianity didn't penetrate or start coming in until the Portuguese started coming and enslaving us in the 1400s. And there's a few different maps that shows the growth and development of the slave trade and how many people they brought in, where they brought us in from, and the different peoples. You see the Dutch, the French, the British, the Spaniards, and the flow. What they don't tell us is the development of it and the type of trade that they brought us in for. But you see it all in Barbados, Jamaica, all throughout the Caribbean. And one thing with the Caribbean is that you see some Islamic leaders in names and in words. You see Islamic architect. If you go to St. Thomas and other the islands, you see the Islamic architect within there. You go to Aruba. If you go coming through the boat or the downtown area, it was a former masjid. You can see it. It's like a former masjid where they have the water coming out. Then you can look at the word Aruba. It's an Arabic word itself. These are some of the Muslim tribes that they brought in: your Moors, your Syrians, your Wolof, your Mandingo, your Tangerines, your Hausa, your Fulani, some of your Dogons. And these are other tribes that they brought them in: Igbo, Yoruba, Angolas, or some of the different tribes that they brought us in. Now, also what Clyburn, Congressman Clyburn, and a few others, they funded what they call the Gullah Geechee Quarter From Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way down to Jacksonville, Florida. They developed different museums and different sites. And it's very, very informative, very rich with history. This is just one of the new African American museum in South Carolina. And they tell you statistics of how many blacks they brought in uh, from West Central Africa, from the Gold Coast, from the Benin, from Senegambia, from the Balfour. Like they said with the Central Africa, the 47,857 they departed, but arrived was only 46,000. So it breaks down the different numbers. They say the slave trade happened for 366 years, 36,000 voyages, 12.5 million estimated Africans was forced into the transatlantic slave trade, 1.8 million estimated number of Africans who were lost their lives, who was killed. And there's many other records that we don't know. So you got to report, if it's just based upon this record here, 12.5 million the people that was brought here, and there's report that 20% of them was Africans. So now you're talking about these 2.5 million people that was brought here was Muslims, of Muslim heritage. And these are some of the different tribes that they brought us from. And they didn't bring us haphazardly. They brought us for our skill sets, for the knowledge that we had. We was taught, many of us when we went to school, we was taught that we had no culture, no education, we couldn't read and write. And they're trying to tell some of us now, those people out of Florida. But the first Hafiz, the first Muslim scholar, arrived here in 1730. His name was Job Ibn Dijallo. He was able to he was a Muslim scholar. They called him the fortunate slave. He was enslaved in 1730 and got his freedom after only being enslaved for 4 years. He got freed in 1734. And here, these are photographs of an article in the Gentleman's Quarterly magazine, written in 1750, telling them do not bring in. This guy was trying to sell some Falanis in Philadelphia, and they told him, "Don't you remember Job? You cannot break these people. Do not bring them in." From Job in 1734, they got his life story, and then in 1968 they wrote a book about him called "The Fortunate Slave." This is a letter that Job wrote in Arabic describing how he was captured and brought and shipped out of what they call St. John's Island. Not Gory's Island, but out of St. John's Island. And this is one of the paintings, photographs of Job that hangs in New England. Another story is this is the youngest Muslim that I was able to find so far. An American African American history book, they call him Vincent Smith. He was captured at the age of 8. When they questioned him, and in his story, he told them he was born in the Dubaka River area. And you see Dubaka River still right here existing in the map. This river still exists. He told him he was born with the name Bakir Toro. But they wrote in the book, they wrote Botir Fora, how they thought it sound. And then he also said that he was named after the famous Abu Bakr Sire of 1716. He was brought here at the age of 8. When he got his freedom at the age of 36, he had owned 100 acres of land. He had purchased 2 of his sons, Suleiman and Kaf, and his wife's freedom, and his daughter. So when he died, he owned over 100 acres of land. The law of the land stated that if you was a Moor or a Turk, you got the right to be free. You can't own slaves, but you got the right to be free. And so in 1753, there's 2 Muslims. One was named Adel Connor, another one named Mahmoud Mohammed. They petitioned the government all in Arabic. And it was a Jewish woman that did the translation for them, and they was able to win their freedom. And in 1790, it was a group of 10 of them, 5 males, 5 females, petitioned the government. And the same Muslim woman, the Jewish woman, Tumbrel, did the translation for them, and they won their freedom. And it became known as the Moor Sundry Act. And she was part of the Spanish, the Jews that was captured and fled the Spanish Inquisition just as many of the Moors or the Moriscos did. There's series of 1768 letter found outside of South Carolina. It is and four of the last surahs of the Holy Quran, the cool surahs. It took them 90 years before they did the translation, and they told us we couldn't read and write. Within this is what they call a jammy script. Even though they wrote in Arabic, they used their African words to express their thoughts. Another personality we find in American history, we heard the story about Kunta Kinte. But we go back and read the book, you see that he talked about Ramadan, he talked about fasting, he talked about his friend Rashid, he talked about Allah. But we've never told the story that Kunta Kinte was a Muslim. Well, here in this picture down here in this frame, this is the actor Chicken George, the grandson of Kunta Kinte, dressed in an Islamic robe, as well as to the bottom right is a plaque in Annapolis, Maryland, honoring the arrival of Kunta Kinte into Annapolis, Maryland. So what we have at least now, two Muslim personalities that arrived throughout the Annapolis, Maryland area, Job Ibn Dijallo, as well as Kunta Kinte. And this is the Chicken George photograph on his tombstone. And his tombstone is in Henry, Tennessee today. There's many different runaway slave advertisements. We just chose a few of them. This one on the top left in the gray is about a brother named Mustafa. Him and his slave master had a scheme went on. They left Edenton, North Carolina, and wound up into Richmond, Virginia, by selling Mustafa quite a few different times. Mustafa gets sold to one slave owner, escape and run. They meet up and go to another and get sold, escape and run. That was the hustle until they made it to Richmond, Virginia. To the top right, there's a runaway slave advertisement looking for three Muslims. One named Kwame, 5 feet 5 inches tall, about 30 years old. Another one named Sambo, about 22 years old, smooth face of the Moorish country. Another Sambo, 25 years old, about 5 feet 5 inches tall. And this is out of Savannah, Georgia. Now, we find in history, there's many, in American history, in the census record, it showed many people with the last name and the first name Sambo. I've learned that many West Africans named their second son Sambo. They call that the warrior spirit. They said that their second child always wanted to compete with the first and dominate the younger. And this is why they identify this as the Sambo spirit. On the bottom left, you have one looking for a man named Mohammed. And this was done in 1774. And this is out of, again, in Savannah, Georgia. You have another group of Muslim brothers that was called the Wahab brothers. And they had the banks of North Carolina. They report that they came, from during the American Revolution with the French, these Wahab brothers were able to develop an Okoke Island off the North Carolina coast, develop a village. And this village wound up with hotels. They had a little airport. They had quite a few, it was like a resort for a minute. And some of those descendants still live there today. Another report is about a group of brothers named the Ben Ishmael tribe. And this Ben Ishmael tribe is what they call the people of the Prairie. That one of the most famous writers, Charles Fenimore Cooper, wrote a book about the Prairie. These people established a town called Mohammed, Illinois, Morocco, and Mecca, Indiana. And they used to make annual journeys through these different locations and make a stop into Annapolis, in the Annapolis area in Indiana, till they got pushed out. They became known as the unwanted people. Those people down there at that time tried to use genetics to get rid of them, to the point that Hitler modeled himself and his genetics to get rid of those people from the process they did. To the point that the next time we hear about them is when the Noble Drew Ali, after he started his organization in Newark, New Jersey, he moved out to the Detroit area. And some of his early followers, his first followers were the people of Ben Ishmael. And he said he moved out there because people were more receptive to our Islam. Another personality we hear about, his name now today in American history is called Joseph ben Heli, but he came here known as Yusuf ben Ali, Ibn Ali, which is Yusuf and Joseph. Ben is Ibn, Heli is Ali. And they first called them the Turk. They're known more as the Turks of Sumter, South Carolina, but in about the 1970s, the president at the time of Turkey found out they really was not Turks. There was more Moors and out of Spain and Morocco. And Yusuf fought with General Sumter in the Revolutionary War. And some of his descendants still live to today. These are some of the families named as Oxidine. Matter of fact, this photograph, they met amongst some of the indigenous Native American Indians in that area. And this is one of the members of the Oxidine family that still exists today in the area. Also, this is a tombstone of one of the Ben Heli families. There's another photograph of Lawrence Ben Heli. Some of the children, you can see the African and the mulattoes look inside these Moors of South Carolina. During the Revolutionary War, we found at least 6 people that had Islamic names. We just got finished talking with Yusuf bin Ali, known as Joseph ben Heli. But there was also a Babbitt Muhammad out of Virginia. There was a Joseph Sabbath and a Francis Sabbath. And there was 2 with
Well, it looks like we lost his sound, so we're gonna give him a chance to get back connected. So I'm just gonna stop sharing his screen just for a second until we can get him back. Oh. Hold on, let me get us back. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I mean, he is sharing a wealth of information. I'm like, oh wow, and even he showed the picture of the fort in San Juan, and I went there, and I wish I had known that there was like something Islamic there to like find, because I definitely would have looked at it. But I have a picture at that fort, and in Old San Juan, they also had because it's small. There's not like a huge town, but they have a really nice museum there with like um, artifacts, and they're very like, to me they were very Afrocentric. Those artifacts that were there in Old San Juan. But if I knew there was something Islamic to find, I definitely would have been searching for it. But when he showed the picture, I was like, oh wow, I've been there. Yeah, so
I thought it was interesting. It's like we have our stamp all over the world.
yeah,
And as he was describing the different tribes and the different centers of those tribes, I thought about us as African Americans. Now, it's so beautiful that we have a combination of those things, where some of those were concentrating on the music or concentrating on the science. And now when they brought us here, we became like the melting pot of all of those different Islamic and West African countries. And we're the beauty of all of that. So I was just amazed at some of the things he was sharing.
yeah. And also I think he's coming back. Also the way that the names
Yeah.
were sort of infused or transformed, right? It was like, oh well, it sounds like this, so it's Ben Haley instead of Ibn Ali. I think that
Yes.
that's really interesting too. How and I'm sure that happened more often than we probably even know.
Yeah. And we see signs of that today, when they can't pronounce your name, they ask you, is it okay if I say? It's like, no, put your foot down. We got to
Right.
document our history and who we are.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Definitely one of those people that I'm like, no, pronounce it right. I tell my husband all the time, because sometimes they jack up Mujahideen, right? And I'm like, no.
Make them say it. Yes.
Make them say it. Exactly. Even when
Yeah.
my children were younger, Anissa, they always wanted to call her Anisha. And I would say, no.
Nope.
Them It's Anissa. And
Yeah.
my mom, just one more, my mom, her name was very interesting, right? But her name is where her name is. And so it's like, call her that. And so when I was in school, they would be like, "Oh, Vivian," and I would go, "No, my mother's name is Vivens Nivens. I know it rhymes. I know it may be unconventional, but her name is Vivens Nivens.
Yes.
No, I didn't mean Vivian. I meant Vivens.
I said what I said.
Yes."
Yes. Yes.
Oh, we have the brother back. Let me get him back on the screen.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, like my son, that was a good piece of conversation. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
And there's other similarities in other names. We're going to go a little bit further in our show.
Okay.
This is a letter that George Washington wrote to the Sultan of Morocco. And this is the letter Sultan of Morocco wrote back to George Washington. George Washington, they were trying to establish a peace treaty. That's why Morocco has the longest peace treaty that exists with the United States. Some of our founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, was U.S. diplomats to the Muslim world. You see their signature in 1787, ratifying the peace treaty. And they both own Qurans. On the left is a copy of Thomas Jefferson's Quran, which Keith Ellison, who was the first Muslim congressman elected, took the oath on Thomas Jefferson's Quran. To the right is a copy of John Adams' Quran, which is in Boston, Massachusetts today. So both of some of our early founding fathers had used the Quran. And out of the first 10 international peace treaties, 5 was done with a Muslim country: Morocco, Algiers, Tunisia, Libya, and Muscat rounded out the first 10 international peace treaties. This here on the bottom is an article of the United States that said that it was not founded on the Christian religion, as it has within itself no character intimate against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslim men. Since then, time has changed, but they first admitted it. America was built upon not the Christian, Judeo-Christian value. Judeo-Christian value was do not kill, do not steal, do not lie and cheat. And they did all these things. But it was built upon the freedom of religion, the freedom to practice religion, and the freedom from the oppressive religion that they was facing with, is what the America's principles was founded upon. Now, at the turn of the century, the early 1800s, we started finding Muslim personalities, towns, and the civil wars. Some of the Muslim personalities we find as Muslims as entrepreneurs, as leaders, and scholars we find in the United States. By the 1820s, we started finding towns and different Islamic symbols around the United States. This here, on the right, I think is number 351. This is my earliest ancestor that I found. You know how Allah tells family kind, kinship, family ties. So trying to build family ties and kinship, I started researching my family history. This here is my earliest ancestor that I found in the United States as a free man. His name was Isaac Freeman. He was born free in 1793. In 1824, he went to court to register himself and be identified. While I was going through his records, I found a guy, and you can see it on the left-hand side. His name was Thomas Haqq, H-A-Q-Q. And we know that is purely Islam, means truth. And that made me start wondering about Sojourner Truth. Did she change her name? Or was she saying that her name was Haqq, and she just used the name Truth about it? And this is just a repeat of some statistics that I talked about earlier on the number of ships, number of years of the slave process that went through and where we came from, and some of the numbers that existed. Here is Yar Mahmoud. Yar Mahmoud is a famous Muslim that lived in the Washington, D.C. area, the Georgetown area. Yar Mahmoud was an entrepreneur. He was known for making fish nets. He had a hauling business. He was known for dickering, and he was known for praying. And he wound up owning property in Georgetown. There's 2 paintings. They didn't paint us as a people. But there's two paintings. One was a painter named Charles Wilson Till, who was a famous painter, basically painted a lot of the presidents. But they heard stories about Yarrow and they wanted to paint him. So this painting on the top hangs up in Philadelphia Historical Society, and this painting on the bottom hangs up still in Washington, D.C. in the Peabody's room. And a few years ago, the building was burning down, and the librarian went in to save some material. And this is the photograph that he saved, this painting. Then they rebuilt property on a house that he owned in Georgetown. This is a historical marker that they did for Yarrow in the house where he lives. Now, this here is one of the most very unique stories I found in the United States. And it's a story of two leaders. You know, what we find in American history is that they used a lot of Muslims as plantation leaders because of our knowledge, our skill sets, our education, and our trustworthiness. One of them was named Bilal Muhammad. They called him Ben Ali. He wrote what they call a risala, a letter, instructing the community how to pray, how to fast, holistic living. This letter leader about 15, 20 miles down the road was Salih Bilali. He was a plantation manager as well. And what I found unique in America is that just like we hear the story, you know, my first time ever hearing about Bilal was from Imam Mufti Muhammad. And he tried to get us to call ourselves Bilalians after describing or after the character and the personality of Bilal ibn Rabah during Prophet Muhammad time, Sallallahu where he was the first muezzin called the prayer, and he was tortured and enslaved. And amongst that torture, all he could say was a hada hada had. Then all he could do is put up the one finger. Still there in our tajud. Well, in between these two islands of Bilals in America, I found this first tombstone with the one finger on it, and his name was Sambo Swift. In here, we found these tombstones from the tip of Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, all the way up to Maine, all the way out to Kansas. Different forms of these tombstones all throughout. These are tombstones we found in what they call their burial ground. Benner, you use a star. I believe this might have been one of the earliest masters they had. They built their houses out of sand, seashells, and limestones. And some of these rooms still exist today. They were known as the Gullah people, the Gullah Geechee people of Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And they was called those Gullah people, those Galala people, those people that believe in Allah. Now, this is the ruins of that building that showed that I believe was mastered. This is what's left now after 20 years ago. And this is Bilal's book. It's still at the University of Georgia. Ali Bilali, his grandson was still at the name Bilali Sullivan. And in 1941, he bought the plantation and we call it the Bilali Sullivan Estate, which still exists on what they call St. Simon Island today. Now, there's a couple of good books as primary source books. One of them is called Drums and Shadows. The author Sylvain Daouf does a good job in revitalizing this work and identifying some of the issues. But in one of the books, she talks about making a flat cake she calls saraka. And in there, this is what they would give out to the children during Ramadan or for the Eid, a sweet cake, saraka, like zakat and zaraka, because they was poor, so they had to do what the best they could do. They also talk about women and finishing prayer saying, I mean, also praying towards the rising of the sun, bowing their heads 3 times during the day, turning towards the east. These are some of the reports of them remembering their grandparents doing on these islands. And we're going to see a little different hints about that. This is one of the historical schools that still exists on that area. While they was enslaved, these Gullah people on that plantation, that Hope Sound plantation, this Barkis is probably Bakir. You see a Fatima. Fatima is a very popular name. You see Ishmael, Tamir. You got this Billy is probably Bilal. You got a Fatima, a Mohammed. This Mohammed is M-E-D. A Hester, a Benna, Ishmael, another Bilali. That's how they spelled the Bilali. A Dick, they called Morocco, a Sambo. Then they called it Kofi from Fula. Here's another Fatima with a Mingo, a Benna, a Merita. This Merita is the same as what Harriet Tubman was given, name that she was given. Here's another Muhammad. Now this Muhammad is an M-E-T, member, and Jadafa. And they valued him as $500. Here's a Suleiman, a Michael, a Fatima, a Killer. These are just some of the names that we find. What I also did, I looked through some of the census records of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, roughly the 1870 census, because we got our freedom, and supposedly got our freedom in 1865. But in the 1870 census, is the first census that the masses of us they identified. Unless you was uniquely freed as a people in the 50s or 60s, that name. So we found in the 1870s, 318 people that came directly from Africa, living in Georgia. And here on this page is Brunswick, Georgia, where my father come from, and where my ancestors I found that came directly from Africa, which is still living at that time. Here to the right in the census, it tells you some of the places where they came from. Upper Guinea, and the age roughly 1785, 1795. Upper Guinea, Guinea, Algeria, or the different regions. It's almost at a point that we could almost identify it was a group that was brought into different areas, like you see in Spalding and Glenn County, and where they listed these people from Africa. And this one with the check to the right is my ancestor, Clara Higginbottom, born 1793. And as I said earlier, these Gullah Geechee people, they were the Muslims that they brought out of Senegal Gambia region to help develop these crops, rice, indigo, and cotton. Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, and Georgetown area, and Charleston, where they make these Europeans rich out of this rice that they develop. They call it the golden rice. And they really make that area very rich. But the Gullah people came all the way down to St. Augustine, and they did indigo, cotton. They really helped produce these crops until God made a change. And when a couple of the hurricanes came and the salt mixed in with the water, it started killing off the rice. The boll weevil came in and helped destroy the. So that also helped in getting us to be able to get our freedoms. And there's many different stories all throughout. Now, this is one of the unique things that I find that a tradition and the transition from Muslims into Christianity. Here, what they call the spiritual tradition, one of the traditions they had was called seeking. If you wanted to become a member of the church, they said they would send you out to nature, into the woods. They said you got to get in touch with God. You got to get in touch with nature before you become a member. And then come back and share that experience with you. And we're taught in the Quran to pay attention to the signs of Allah through nature, to the signs of life and experience that you go to. Another tradition that they carried over is the call and response. We know it. We see it in amongst the Christian church and Christian ministers. Can I get an amen? Amen, brother. Preach, brother. In the nation line, teach, brother. That's right. And one of the ladies, or the Gullah people, broke it down, and even explained even our music. She used the example of Sam Cooke working on the train game, going downtown. Can I? What was it? Ooh, ah, ooh, ah. For me, I could see it in the Gladys Knight and the Pips. Gladys was saying, and the Pips would come back with a harmony, call and response to it. Muslim, this is part of our tradition. The Adhan is a call and response. Hey Allah Salat, hey Allah Falah. Kakamati Salat. Prayers, come to prayer, come to success. Prayer is ready. Call and response. A matter of call and response, what we do, we say takbir. What? Allahu Akbar. Call and response. Another thing is if we say Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, then we're going to say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, call and response. So we see this tradition that was passed on. Another one is what they call the ring shout. The ring shout is tradition where we used to make Hajj. You got to make 12, make 7 12 counterclockwise. They couldn't go on Hajj no more. So they came up with this invention about the ring shot. I don't understand the steps that they did, but they would make 7 12. This is part of the rituals. Now here is a video that was on a plantation in Bellafield plantation in Georgetown, South Carolina. And I guess it was Easter time. And they came down and they took a film these children making 12 and showing the steps. I don't understand the steps. I can't speak on the steps, but you see how they held their hand. It's the same way that we hold our hand and when we pray over our neighbor court. And so that was one of the models that they did. Now, I'm not sure if I can get this other one to play. So I won't worry about that one. But the other one, that's the woman that was talking about explaining different rituals and the foods that we brought in. Now, the first churches was a form of prayer house, was a praise house. That you go and praise Allah, go pray. It was a place to make sajda. Your gullah people, though, and today they call the name the meaning of spiritual people of God. And they all maintained modesty and covered themselves with layers and pieces on their hair. Now, this is a photograph. You can see this brother with the horse with a kufi on his head. And you can see it like an Islamic design or African design on his garb. And you see the sisters all in layers. There was in African American books, and this is why it's important for us to tell our story. They don't recognize the story. In African American books, they talk about the women with their scarves on their heads and their prayer beads or juju beads, not understanding about being dicker beads. And this is all in Hilton Head, South Carolina, where many of the Gullah people were, the Africans that they brought us here. This is not a tombstone with the one finger on it. This we found in a church cemetery at some of the founding fathers. They had the tradition of making the sweetgrass baskets. This here to the right is an old Tabby Room hospital that was built it's on St. Simon Island. They used this hospital. This is where Harriet Tubman went during the Civil War, and Susan King, the nurse, worked at this hospital during the Civil War. And they made their houses out of sand, seashells, and limestone. This is a house that they call the Morse House in Jacksonville, Florida, on Bay Street because of the Islamic architect and design. There's a church, the first African Baptist church in Savannah, Georgia. All on the second floor has this Ajami script written on it. Years ago, when we used to go down there, they would call it African Scribble Scrabble. They've since learned to understand this is African Ajami script right, and it still exists today. And the second African Baptist church in Savannah, Georgia, is where they gave the General Order 15, where we supposed to got the 40 acres and the mule. Some of us did get the 40 acres. I'm not sure about the mule, but some of us did get the 40 acres. Now, coming back down to Savannah, Georgia, St. Simon area, there's a book about what they call the Wander, which was a slave ship, illegal slave ship, for the transatlantic slave trade, landed in Jekyll Island. So they put up a historical site in the area. Another thing that's unique in American history, we see these signs all throughout. There's a movie and a book that was called The Fanny Kimball Story. The Fanny Kimball story was a story about a European woman, woman from Philadelphia area, marrying a Georgia plantation owner, and he went broke. So and going broke, he had to sell all the slaves that he had, people that he had enslaved and brought from directly from Africa. It was known as the largest slave trade sale, and this is a location monument about it. The unique thing about it, that tombstone that I found, Sambo Swift was part of that plantation, but he was one of the few that remained because of his age and his health. He was able to stay there. And these are some of Sambo Swift's records. You see Butler Islands in McIntosh County, his wife and his son. And this tombstone, with, between these two brows and the oneness of God, I find this very unique in American history. Another Muslim personality that was an entrepreneur and a leader was a Prince of my slave, Abdul Rahman Ibn Ansari. He wrote this letter in 1828 saying, "My name is Abdul Rahman, son of Ibrahim. I was born in the city of Timbuktu. I lived there till I was 5 years old. Then he moved to the capital, Timbuktu. Then he lived there for 25 years. Then he talked about how he got captured and enslaved and brought to Gambia, and then brought to the Limca. And he wrote this in 1828. And they told us we couldn't read and write, but they didn't understand what we could read and write. And to the right is what they call the Lord's Prayer, would make you think that is the Our Father out of heaven, hallowed be thy name. But no, it's the Al-Fatiha. And then he's giving salutation to the Prophet, Mohammed sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This letter here to the right is housed, the other looking one is housed in Philadelphia Historical Society and the Brown University of Yale today. Muslims lived amongst the Seminole Indians. There was a fort not far from St. Augustine, the first city in the United States. And Muslims, they built a fort, what I would call a gated community. And they had developed plots and land and sites. They was living healthy. They was model. And so many of the Africans, men and women that were enslaved, wanted to escape into Florida and to these areas. They had one with Fort Negro. Now the fort was Fort Musa that they developed. And then when there was different villages until Andrew Jackson came and wanted to destroy them, what he called the Gullah Indian Wars. And Abraham was one of the translators and the Muslims amongst them. And they lived in the bush for a long time and kept themselves modest and covered. Now, as I stated earlier, Harriet Tubman was born with the name of Merita or Mina. And she reports that her parents would fast on every Friday. And if you look at Harriet Tubman, she always wore a turban or had her hair covered, always was modest. Harriet Tubman also said that she waited. She wouldn't move without the inspiration of God, or some vivid dream. So she was a believer, and she moved on the faith of God. Here you see that in her museum, she holds her hands up like Muslims do in making a quick dua. She was a strong believer in God. Now, another unique thing down there in that Eastern Shore area. Now we talked about Kunta Kinte coming from out of that area, Job Ibn Dijalo, Harriet Tubman. And these are churches that they did. And in there, in the early reports, the Europeans wrote that they thought they was Gothic. What African, what black man would know anything Gothic? They would know something about masjids from West Africa. So you see the steeple, you see the Islamic architect, you see the two doors, male, female, you can see the minaret. And they thought it was very unique at the time. Now we take it for granted. Now this is one of the churches, you can see the steeple, the minaret. This is a window here because they redid all the windows. They redesigned and put an Islamic design within that window to make sure it still exists. Here, this is the first Islamic design house in the United States. It comes from my own hometown in Britain, designed by P.T. Barnum. It existed from 1848 to 1857 before it burnt down. This is to the right, top right. This is his museum, which still exists today. You see the minaret and the dome. This here was a skating ring. They called the pyramid, the mosque, that we as kids used to go there to skate. And then it was built on a street called Iverson Avenue. Iverson Avenue still exists today. Now, census records is a great source of information. This is a census record of 1850, when a guy living in Ohio had the name Henry Allah. It might have been Abdullah, but his name was Henry Allah, 21 years old, coming from Ireland. So I go run and check Google, and I found about 7 different people, one named Kate Islam, coming from Ireland, people with Islamic names coming from Ireland. So I Googled Muslim in Ireland, there was nothing. I Googled Moors of Ireland. Moors conquered the southern parts of Ireland, and many people converted to Islam. And that's one reason why you see them, when the Irish first came here, they treated them like us. Here is in California, 1850, a guy named Mohammed, 28 years old, coming from Arabia. We found also in the 1860 census, 8 people were living free in North Carolina in 1860. 2 people were living free in North Carolina. They came from Africa. Some were from Burkina Faso, Brent, Guinea, and Ghana, and one from Afghanistan. These are a list of people. You got from Africa, Burkina Faso. Now this thing right here, and this is in 1850. There's many people came from Burkina Faso, and it said Catawba, North Carolina. Catawba, North Carolina is where all my mother's siblings was born. And Catawba. In there, her great grandmother was listed as a native or an indigenous person, a Native American Indian. Now they tried to destroy this Catawba and call it part of Coswell County now. But this is the early history, and this is them in the 1860s. You see people come from Mali, Sudan, South Africa, Mauritania. It describes some of them that came Beni, that was still living, and they could tell you where they came from, Tunisia. So yes, so you have Muslims here that came from the Spanish Inquisition, came from the African explorers out of the 1300s, and came from West Africa. So we're not just one harmonic source of people. We came from different means, different ways. But yes, we came here from West Africa. Out of West Africa, and he was a scholar. He was a Sufi scholar. He had made Hajj before he was captured and enslaved, and he was one of the most prolific writers. He wrote over 11 different letters. He used signs and symbols for amulets. It was a Muslim that owned his autobiography. And that Muslim went to school, to Sister Clara Mohammed's school in California. His name is Derek Bird. And he sold that Omar Ibn Said autobiography to the Library of Congress before he's passed. And in some African American history books, they try to sell us that Omar had Arab blood, because they just could not connect that black man, that African, to have the ability to read and write and be educated. They gave him also a Bible, all in Arabic. This Bible exists today in the in Davidson College in North Carolina. These are 2 pages from his actual autobiography, which Derek Bird had owned, and Library of Congress has today. Now, this is the first Mohammed family we found freed in the United States. In 1850, he had a daughter named Margaret Mohammed, listed as black and be free, Jeremiah Mohammed, his wife Sarah, and his siblings. Some of his siblings wound up moving into Baltimore, and they became vendors, and they became known as the Arabs, as vendors. This is one of his children, Jeremiah, born in 1862 and died in 1923. And his children listed. And this here is his death notice. One of his descendants moved out to Oklahoma, had a cake mix called Omar Cake Mix. Another one of his descendants became known as Margaret Hagan. She had a seamstress business in Baltimore and Philadelphia and in Washington, D.C. We found Muslims that fought in the Civil War. With my limited understanding of Arabic names, I chose maybe 50 Arabic names. But out of those 50 names, we found at least 50 people, 292 people with Islamic names. Black, white, some fought for the Confederates. Quite a few fought for the Union. Osman, Rahman, Mohammed. There was two Mohammeds. Hassan. This here is Max Hassan that fought in the Civil War, came directly from Africa. This is Nicholas Said, fought directly, came from directly. In fact, he got a beautiful story. He got caught up into the Tangerine Wars between Morocco and Mali and got captured and sold to Muslim in Morocco. Muslim in Morocco sold to Muslim in Turkey. He wound up being sold to many different people. He learned 9 different languages. When he got his freedom, he had money. He loaned a ship captain $500 to bring him to America. When he got to America, he joined the military, and then he became a teacher and wound up living in Tennessee. And this is some of his records. See, and when he was in Tennessee, he said where he came from and what parts of Africa that he came from, his father's birthplace and his mother's birthplace. And he was a school teacher. This is Max Hassan records, Health Department records, the U.S. United States Colored Troop records. Max didn't have so much money, so he also lived in a poorhouse. But he also lived at one point, he worked as a porter. This here is a Quran that was saved in the Civil War when the Union's troop went down to burn down the town of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They asked the captain, "Can we save some books? Can we save some books?" He said, "No, you can save one book." And this was the only book that he was able to save. And it says this is the only book that was saved in the Civil War and the fire. And this is still housed today in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Now, another unique thing that I found, oh my God. These were people, they call them the Zoroastrians. Some they can identify as Algerians, some they identify as North Africans. But these are soldiers that fought in the Civil War. And there's regiments in New York, Kentucky, all around. All around, I found unique. So we was in the in Fredericksburg Civil War Museum, and we found this information about this one of the Zori's collars, and the uniforms that they wore and their dress. This painting, it looks like the Union's troops, but if you really look at it, you see my brothers in the turbans and blue and red uniforms. They helped them to win the Civil War. This is one of the unions, the uniforms that was in that library. Now, when we first seen this was in Barbados, and they called the changing of the guards, and they was all dressed in Moorish clothes and garbs, changing the guards. It was the first time we saw it. Then the Fredericksburg Museum. This is an active photograph of these soldiers. They didn't get the citizenship to after they won. But you see these regiments all throughout in the Islamic garbs. This one we found amongst the Gullah people in the Fusky Island, South Carolina. They wound up going there and freeing them. And so there was this little Iron Man, but they was talking about these soldiers that came in there. Of course, again, these are tombstones. This is in that Pierce Butler plantation. And the last slave, that lived Liverpool Hazard, and honoring him. Now, another unique thing in the United States that Muslims was not cowboys; that was camel boys. The United States government hired 3 Muslims to bring out 75 camels from around the Muslim world to go out west. 2 of them we know had made it into American history. One was Hajj Ali. They nicknamed him High Jolly. When he died, they built his tombstone as a pyramid and put a camel on top of it. And this is his wife and their wedding day. We found tombstones, as I said earlier, all throughout the United States at Sambo Swift, women. These we found in Connecticut. These we found in Tennessee. To the left, this one said Usman Rahman. They spell Rahman, Rockman. But we know how they spell Rahman. These are tombstones to the right, are tombstones written in Arabic, in the old Ottoman script, which was demolished in the 1920s. And this was found in a town called Mecca, Indiana, in a European family cemetery called the Hickson Family Cemetery. These are tombstones we found up in Maine, Kalasi Balowski, Albanian Mohammedan, Hassan, Turkish men. And in this town, Mecca, Indiana, as I stated earlier, the Ben Ishmael tribe, who established the town Morocco, Illinois, Muhammad, Illinois, and Mecca, Indiana. And they used to make annual journeys. This is Mecca, Indiana, which has one of the few covered bridges. They have 2 cemeteries, one they call the Hickson Cemetery, which is a family cemetery. The other one they call the Arabian Cemetery. We found the tombstones with the 1 finger on it, as well as other symbols. And this town, Muhammad, they tried to change its name to Middletown, but there was a town already called Middletown in Illinois, so they had to go back and keep the name Muhammad, Illinois. This is one of the grocery stores, the highway sign, the administrative building, the library. And inside the cemetery, the first cemetery, and then we found these tombstones with the Tahid on it, with the 1 finger on it. And in American history, the researchers about cemeteries said that they thought that it was pointing up going to heaven. But we as Muslims know that Muslims say that there's oneness in God, no matter what you do to us. And the Albert Camel, this town called Mohammed, Texas. This Mohammed, Texas had a post office from 1857 to 1916, and it still exists today. So no, we were not that macho cowboy boy, man, but we were camel boys. So from tombstones to towns to Arabic letters, we found in the 1800s the early history of Muslims in America. And from towns, from with African names to Islamic names, 29 Lebanon, 19 Cairo, 17 Egypt, 12 Medina, 8 Mecca, 7 Mina, 6 Alhambra. Somebody had to know something. 4 Andalusia. You got New Medina, Ishmael. Another one named El Qadir was named after a famous Muslim who helped establish save a Muslim in one of the wars that existed. So I want to thank y'all for your time, patience, and perseverance. So I will open up if there's any questions or anything that you'd like for me to share.
Brother Amir, listen. You have taken us on a journey, okay? And we appreciate you so much for that. We were at the moment where we sort of lost connection with you, we were talking about how it is for us to have right? You had like a double talking.
Yes.
I hear myself. I have an echo. Do you all hear it?
Now I do, but
I'm gonna go out the studio and come back, and I'm gonna allow my co-host to talk to you.
Yes, because I want to hear what else Marcia had to say. That was going well, and I want to echo what she said. Look, I have it too. Dr. Patricia, I'm gonna let you try. You're on mute, Dr. Patricia.
Okay, it's on now, right? Can you hear me now? Okay, all right. So, Brother Mia, this is fantastic. It's like a wealth of information. It's like if we have to go back to the museum. We have to come to the museum to actually go back through this information and see it again and again. One of the things I have questions because it just fascinates me that if you watch Kente Kente Kunte about the your name. You had to change your name, and all of us, got these names and these European names. But it's amazing that some people actually were able to keep their names. How did that happen? How were they able to keep their names? You actually found people with Muslim names.
Yes. What I see in the Georgia and the South Carolina area is that, especially on these islands, Sapo Island, St. Simon Island, Dafuski Island, Hilton Head, is that when it got hot, too hot, the mosquitoes, that slave owner would go back. Philadelphia, go inland, he scats. So these Muslims was trusted, they're honest, there was Muslims. So there's that honesty, so they made them plantation managers. So by being plantation managers, they was able to maintain and do certain things undercover and maintain. Like Bilal, he told his slave master in the War of 1812, he said, look, I got 80 men to help defend this island. I can't count on the Christians that you own. I got 80 men to help defend. And he gave them rifles to help defend this island from the British coming over. And the British didn't come there. Now on the island, on the other island, where on Saint Simon, with Salih Bilali, the British was able to entice them to join in the war to get their freedom, and they wound up going to Nova Scotia. And that is why you have, if you ever seen that book, the Book of the Negroes, I think it was called, and they did a movie about it.
Yes, I
And,
just watched something in relation to this when they went to Nova Scotia.
yes, okay, and now and up in Nova Scotia, I forgot the name, Bridge. I can't think of
I
the
feel like
bridge.
it's Book of Negroes too. I'm gonna look it up while you're talking.
And in that book, I mean, in there you'll see a lot of Islamic names, and in that cemetery we found tombstones with the Tawhid on it, with the one finger as well. So you that is the only way I seen that many of them happen. Now another thing I noticed, what they did later on is that they gave them Islamic middle names or some nicknames. Like if you ever heard Duke was short for Dula. One of the examples that we have is that the Four Tops guy, the last one that passed, we knew him as Duke, but his name was Abdul Bakir or Fakir. He was a Muslim from Bangladesh. Another thing that we see that people are doing now, short, I don't care for it, for Muhammad, they call you Mo for Muhammad, shorten it up as slang. So we was able to camouflage, I believe. Now, another book or as a DVD called The Daughters of the Dust by Sarah Dash. And in that book, it shows you the psychological warfare that they use to get us out of our faith, to use to get us out of our belief. In there, you see that the guy, old man, dressed in like American, like Western, okay? But he's teaching the guy how to use his dicker beats and to pray. And they're teasing him, oh, man, you're sticking with the old ways. But what you see them do is that they're dressed in Islamic robes, but yet are Christians going to get baptized. So they kept on the outer camouflage, but changed the inner. And then those that lived on the mainland, they came back with new toys, new clothes, new different things, and enticed them with what we call today bling. I know that sometimes when I was born in Connecticut, but I moved to South Carolina. To Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, Virginia was very quiet, slow paced thing. So my children would go sometimes and stay a little while. When I go back up to them, man, they got all these kind of gadgets. They got all this kind of new, all this different stuff. So they was excited about the bling. So that's what you see, and that daughter does. That repetition with it. Same thing with the church. What they did they enticed the people. The first group of people that got the freedom to go back to Africa to teach them Christianity. And this is what you see in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and a few of these other places. The Africans or the blacks, they brought them back. They made them they made them the upper class. They gave them the privileges, made them house Negroes, and made the indigenous people that were still there, the field people, and they gave them more to bling, more the money for those that came from Africa, and so tried to make them more attractive to the indigenous people. So the whole strategy in the Quran is a perfect, beautiful reminder of their strategy that they use. When the strategies kill off the male child, let the women folks live. They still do that. They killed off the man, not so much physically with the gun, but they kill off his potential, kill off his pride, lock him up. There's so many different ways and different strategies that they do. And they kill off that male or that aggressive leadership energy that the women have as well, because we have many black queens, many leadership, many countries that have that black woman as ruler. Matter of fact, this is the third program I've done in the last 3 weeks. First program was done by Muslims of South New Jersey, and all women, very progressive, and they brought the exhibit up, reached out to community, did a lot of work for Islamic Heritage Month all throughout Jersey. I just left New York, Westchester County, with a women group, Muslim women group, that got us into 2 high schools. One high school was over 3,000 students, another high school over 2,300, with the exhibit in there, and having the students come out to learn, to read, to study, and get educated about America's pluralist. Now I get y'all, another woman group about Sister Clara Mohammed. It is the year of the women. I mean, it ain't not just the year of the women. It's been the year. It is our reality. You look at Moses. His mother was inspired. What? Put that boy in that little boat. Ship him out. Have him trust him when I give you. Trust him when I tell you. And right. She did, right? And then what? She sent her daughter. Go follow him. Okay? And when she said, look, I know somebody, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So they was back to connected. Look at Mary. Mary's mother prayed for a righteous child. She got a girl. She said, whoa, what the world? I'll say, I know what you know now. Right? And she produced a child without the agency of man. Jesus is the power, the manifestation of God's word through a woman.
Alhamdulillah.
A woman without the birth of a man. What's that thing, man? It's bad to have a child without a man. I'm just talking to my niece.
That's fine. Look, as you're thinking of it, I just wanted to say, yes, the book that you were talking about is the Book of Negroes, and it's a series. So I just finished watching it. So it's so interesting that you mentioned it. It's about 6 episodes, and it's so good. So if you have not seen it,
her name is what? Amirta, right?
Yes, her name is Amirta. Yes. Yeah.
Go by and say what they say. Look, I seen little thing I seen, man. Look, in America, like Bilal, you saw the different ways they spelled the name Bilal, right? And Mohammed, there's over 31 different ways how they spell the name Muhammad in America.
Yeah.
Mohammed, Mmed, Mmettmett, Aded. So I learned not to,
Yeah.
Allah, but now I'm learning, you got a certain name. Like, matter of fact, there's one guy in America, name was Belowski. Okay,
Wow.
Belowski, he's from Eastern Europe. He got the ski on it. He's from Eastern Europe. So when we start learning, the different phases, of it. And
So
I
I
do want to
have a question. Oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something? Because I have
say,
one
go ahead.
more question before we start to round out the conversation, because we do have to close the program very shortly. But
Yeah,
if
man,
you
you're gonna
have
miss me. You're gonna make me miss the half
no, no, no.
half watch the
We don't
Spanish.
want to listen.
My
We don't
Puerto
want you
Rican
to miss.
brother show off.
That's right. We don't want you to miss Bad
It's too
Bunny.
late. I gotta watch now. I gotta watch the half. I gotta watch the little commercial stuff. Alhamdulillah, this is better. This is better.
So I just wanted to know, as we close out the conversation, you mentioned that you were invited to go to some high schools, and we are the Clara Mohammed Schools Network, so we always like to add to the conversation something that pertains to our young people. And so I'm curious to know, how receptive were the young people to learning these various different things about history, particularly because so much of what you share is um, either unknown in the public space or contrary to things that they've been taught.
Yes. Look. I mean, yes, there was those that was in there that wasn't excited or engaged. But what I found to be to help them engage is that we came up with a couple sheets and questions. So when they came in looking for the answers, looking for the information. It exposed them to a lot. What what I found unique, that a lot of them chose Honorable Elijah Muhammad as the one that was inspiring and stimulating to them. And so then it gave me the opportunity, to share with them, that Elijah Muhammad of the Nation of Islam started standing up for freedom, justice, and equality, which we need today. You try to look. I'm finding that this is a great dawah too, this educational piece, because they hear so much. And so they're looking for another side of this story. And what we did with our exhibit now, we expanded it to use as the different country where the people come from. Like we got like 21 different countries that Muslim that make up the mosaic of the history, the contribution of history to Muslims in America. Of course, you're African, Guinea, Gambia, Senegal, Nigeria, Morocco are some of the early ones. But some of these countries now that's been here for maybe 30, 40, 50 years, like Somalians. They are one of the most prolific people that are involved in the politics. Somalians, they got Muslim women elected as mayors in Oregon, Minnesota, and in Maine. They got state elected officials all throughout the country. They are one of the most politically, I see, astute and active people, to the point I was trying to wonder what is going on. But I have one guy explain to me is that Somalians are more involved, or people that are been under the British rule. They're used to voting. The Arabs and the Gulf state people are not used to voting. They live under a dictatorship. So this is where you see the lackadaisy of the voting. But those that have been under the British rule, they vote. And you see another display of this in the Indo-Pak people. India and Pakistanians. They have modeled our civil rights efforts. They have modeled our engagement and getting involved and getting positions where that you see in the government and in many of these institutions are Pakistanians and Indians are in leadership positions within the government roles in these different departments. They superseded us in their efforts in organizing and getting involved and getting engaged.
Yeah.
And by doing each one of the history, because everybody wants to see this story, and by doing that, I've been able to see like I watched this last time. I'm thrilled. I see people come from Afghanistan looking for this story and being amazed. I watched a sister from Nigeria say, "Oh, that's where I come from. This is my people, my tribe." Watching people be able to connect themselves to the American story, and seeing themselves as part of that fabric. Same thing as the Pakistanians and the Palestinians. Because they tell that story. Matter of fact, this trip, I haven't seen that many Yemens, but this trip I've seen two different people come from Yemen, and one of the early union labor groups was led by a Muslim from Yemen, and he made a historical contribution.
Yeah.
I did, and the biggest wave that an opportunity for us to do, is to tap our Latino community. They are part of that diaspora, especially from the Spanish Inquisition. They might be a little further away from us into that light, but I come from that old nation Islam school where they would say, what is the job of the civilized man? But to teach and train the uncivilized. One of the things that we're supposed to do, one of the best dawah efforts is education. Sister Clara, Mohammed, and I told them one of the questions was, what women do you, out of the Islamic community, you can admire? And someone chose Sister Clara Mohammed. And I told them because she led the community. She held the fort down. She helped produce education. She's the one that helped the home schools get started.
Right.
Excuse me. So what I'm learning is that we got to come out of our cocoon and start becoming comfortable who we are. We can't get caught up into the color thing, but know that we are a blessed thing. And we need to stand up in that blessedness and help lead this world.
Absolutely.
One thing I seen that one brother in New Jersey said that Allah said that let there rise out of you a band of people. Good. The stand of heart of what is good. He don't say Jew, Christian, or Muslim. He said band of people.
Right.
So the band of people, let's rise. Let's help guide. Like one of the things, man, I was shocked, man. Like these Latinos, man, they know that the African connection. They man.
Yes. You have a lot of Afro Latino history that they display, and so it's really interesting to see that. But we do have to bring the show to a close. But before we go, let the people who are watching know how to connect with the museum and you and the work that you do. So I don't know if you want to share socials or a website. Go for it.
Inshallah. Our website is www.aihmuseum.org. We also have an app. Sometimes it works good, sometimes it don't. But I'm not a totally tech guy. But if you can get it and hold it down, man. It's AIH Museum. You on Google Store or on Apple Store, and it has the one finger on it. And once you get it down, the virtual exhibit, oh my God, there's nothing but from the legends on up to 2024 at least. There's some Muslim in America. You could text me 202-841-9386. Call me, you're gonna be in trouble. You could text me, I will respond. Email Amir, AMIR, at muslimsinamerica.org. The museum, we are don't have a physical space right now. This is why we do more traveling. But alhamdulillah, we've paid for the design of the museum, an interactive museum. What we envision is a space that will be a little theater. So we pay for all the theater equipment, all the videos and designs to tell the orientation story. We've have an active exhibit that was going to cover the legends, not as much, maybe 4 stories of the legends, interactive. And right now, the interactive personality that we got is Sister Aisha Prime that would tell those stories. And that's paid, waiting for space to fabricate it, to put it in. We're working now on the design of the 1700s, 1800s, or the rest of the exhibit space, so that when we get in that space, we'll be ready to launch. And what we're looking for is to create more interactive. So in the meantime, what we're doing is we have increased our traveling exhibits. Please contact us if you want an exhibit to come to your neighborhood, to your library, to your school, to your masjid. This is one of the best Islamic Dawah programs that I've seen. And we'll work with other groups to help them develop their story. Everybody got a story. Your community has a story. We need to learn to develop that and be more invasive. Look, everybody follow our culture, right? Everybody, I mean, you got the Chinese hip hop, the Chinese, Japanese hip hop, and before that, they had the Motown people, right?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Come on, they love Malcolm, they love Muhammad Ali, and they're gonna come to love W.D. Muhammad. We do this thing right.
That's right. And we just want to let you know that we appreciate you for coming on the Power of Educating Our Own this evening. You have shared more than what we even expected. So it is exciting that we have this memorialized on our page. The brother has shared ways to get in contact with him to bring the exhibits that he has local to you. Reach out to him, connect with him, particularly as it relates to our young people. Many of them don't have these connections to this level of their history, and it's important. It's empowering for them, and we need to make sure that they have more experiences to be connected to it. This has been the Power of Educating Our Own. Again, this is a podcast hosted by the Clara Mohammed Schools Network. We are here every Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And inshallah, God willing, we will be back here next Sunday at the same time, where we will be talking about moon sighting as we prepare to go into the blessed month of Ramadan. We ask that Allah allows us to see it. And with that, we'll see you next time. Peace.
Now, in concluding this, when the slave traders and the black traders of Africa, traitors, different, traitors, when the slave traders and the traitors of Africa called themselves Muslims, were fighting each other and carrying on and weakening their people over there, so that the white traders come in there and get us, take us on slave ships and bring us here. Now, all right? Yeah. So now, when all that happened, what you think was happening to our human soul? Let me tell you, God has given me an eye to see into the very abstract form of the human being by my study of the Quran. Yes. Now, I'm going to tell you what was happening. I know, as if I was there. The soul of those victims had given up on this world. They knew they were going to their death. They knew they were going to circumstances that were going to finish them off. They would never have their lives again. They knew that. But in their soul, they were saying, our children will one day be free again, and they will serve God. We have failed, but our children was one day serve God. And now their prayer that they prayed in the deep recesses of their soul has come true. And not only of the descendants of the black people of Africa, from Islam coming to Islam, taking up the divine cause, but those who never were Muslims, their children from Christianity, their children from Judaism, their children from paganism are embracing Islam in America. And we are going to build new Africa. New Africa, right here in the United States. Allahu Akbar. And the soul of those suffering victims, they're rejoicing because of us here today.